Hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll be going into the next subtopic in Chapter 6. 6.2 Absorption Spectrum of Photosynthetic Pigments. As usual, before we go into the lesson, let's have a look at the learning outcomes for this subtopic. I hope that by the end of this video, you would be able to state the photosynthetic pigments that are involved in photosynthesis. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. In the previous video, we talked about how photosynthesis can be defined, how photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. Inside the chloroplast, there's chlorophylls. So let's learn more about the chlorophylls, which is the photosynthetic pigments. The role of photosynthetic pigments is quite simple. It is to absorb light energy, and they are located on the thylakoid membrane in the chloroplast. There are three types of photosynthetic pigments, which is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and carotenoids. Under carotenoids, we also have xanthophyll, carotene, and pheophytin. So these are three examples of carotenoids that you would find in most plants. Of these three types of pigments, chlorophyll A is a primary pigment, whereas chlorophyll B and all these carotenoids are called accessory pigments. And when we talk about absorbing light, we should understand what is light. So apa tu cahaya? Apa yang kena serap oleh photosynthetic pigments? Light, in case you forget, it is a form of energy that is called electromagnetic energy or electromagnetic radiation. Okay, it's a type or it's a form of energy. The entire range of electromagnetic radiation is the electromagnetic spectrum. So this is what I'm sure you've seen in your science classes and even in your physics classes before this. This is the electromagnetic spectrum. The visible light, which is the various colors that are seen by the human eyes, are able to simulate photosynthesis. The visible spectrum of light is from 380 nanometers to 750 nanometers. So what we can usually see with our naked eyes is within this wavelength of light. And light itself consists of discrete particles known as photons. The shorter the wavelength of the photon, the greater the energy carried by each photon. And photosynthetic pigments are able to absorb and reflect some of the visible light. So secara ringkasnya, cahaya adalah satu bentuk tenaga. Tenaga tersebut adalah dalam bentuk electromagnetic waves ataupun electromagnetic particles. Bergantung kepada wavelength dia. Okay, ada yang kita boleh nampak dengan mata kasar, ada yang kita tidak boleh nampak dengan mata kasar, tapi masih membawa tenaga. So yang kita boleh nampak dengan mata kasar adalah ini, visible light. Okay, so photosynthetic pigment, dia dapat serap sebahagian daripada tenaga, cahaya tenaga ini. Alright, so that's the very simple one, and let's go right into the content. When we talk about photosynthetic pigments, okay, we can think about how chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and the carotenoids would absorb light. For the chlorophylls, chlorophyll A will absorb blue and red light, so they will appear as a bluish-green pigment. Yang dia serap adalah biru dan merah. Bila kita tengok dengan mata kasar, ataupun melalui mikroskop or whatever, bila kita tengok chlorophyll A tersebut, dia akan kelihatan bluish-green, hijau biru. Whereas if we take chlorophyll B will also absorb blue and red light, but it will reflect and appear as a yellowish-green pigment. The carotenoids will absorb purple light, but at slightly different wavelength. Xanthophyll will appear as a yellow pigment, carotene will appear as an orange pigment, pheophytin will appear as a gray pigment. All these pigments will absorb light at their specific wavelength. Okay? Dia bukan semua cahaya dia boleh serap. Ada beberapa ataupun ada satu range sahaja wavelength yang dia dapat serap. Range yang dia dapat serap itu adalah dia punya absorption spectrum. Okay? The range at which they can absorb those wavelengths of light is the absorption spectrum. This is a graph plotting the absorption of light by photosynthetic pigments against the wavelength of light. Okay, so for each of this, you can see chlorophyll A will absorb light at this range, and then it will reflect the light at this range. It absorbs a bit more red light over here. For chlorophyll B, you can see that it absorbs light, blue light over here in this range, a red light over here in this range, and that's why it appears as a yellowish green. Whereas for carotenoids, they can absorb purple lights, but at different wavelengths. So kamu tengok ada yang wavelength ini dia boleh serap, ada yang wavelength ini dia boleh serap, wavelength ini dia boleh serap, tapi cahaya lain dia akan reflect. So that's why carotenoids mostly appear as orange, yellow, or gray. Just a reminder that chlorophylls absorb blue and red lights. Jangan cakap dia absorb blue saja ya. Dia akan absorb biru dan merah. Okay, so let's talk about the structure of the photosynthetic pigment. Ini kita fokus kepada chlorophyll sahaja ya. Kalau kita betul-betul zoom in kepada chlorophyll tersebut, kita akan nampak structure dia kelihatan seperti ini. In the older syllabus, you had to memorize and also understand the structure of the chlorophyll. It's no longer in your syllabus, but I'm teaching it to you anyway, which is why we have this slide. Okay, so the chlorophyll is a main photosynthetic pigment. Dia adalah antara pigment utama yang kita boleh jumpa dalam tumbuh-tumbuhan yang melakukan photosynthesis. The molecule itself, the chlorophyll, has two main parts, a complex ring and a long side chain. So you have over here your porphyrin ring, which is also called the complex ring. And you have down here is the side chain or the hydrocarbon side chain. The ring structure up here is a porphyrin ring that will absorb the light energy. In the center of the ring, over here, you have this little red box that will contain a magnesium atom. So secara ringkasnya, ini structure dan part yang akan menyerap tenaga cahaya adalah ring ini, porphyrin ring ini. And over here, you would have the slightly different structure. Okay, if you are looking at a chlorophyll A molecule, at this end over here, it will be a CH3. But if you're looking at a chlorophyll B molecule, at this end of the ring, you will have CHO. But once again, slide ini adalah maklumat tambahan. It's just extra information. You don't have to memorize it. But do try to look at it. If you remember, that's good. If not, don't stress too much about it. Alright, and then we're moving on to the next segment. So this is the part where you are supposed to think, oh, okay, so if that is what the chlorophylls do, why are leaves colored green? The answer to that very simple question is that the interaction of light with chloroplast is why leaves appear green. The chlorophyll molecules of the chloroplast will absorb violet, blue, and red light done by chlorophyll, which is the colors most effective during photosynthesis, and then what is reflected or transmitted is the remaining colors, which is mostly green light. And that's why our leaves will appear green. So if anybody asks you why are leaves green, make sure you try to answer in something along these lines. And you can also separate pigments using something called a chromatography technique. A chromatography technique is a technique used to separate photosynthetic pigments by using chromatography paper. So, kalau kita tiada gadget yang canggih-canggih pun, kita masih boleh keluarkan photosynthetic pigment daripada daun-daun menggunakan teknik ini. This is supposed to be the experiment that you should be able to do in person. But given the circumstances, we may or may not be able to have the chance to do this. There is also a home version of this experiment if you're interested in looking up online. If you are able to have access to the apparatus and the materials, feel free to do this on your own. Just this slide is here to let you know we can take our photosynthetic pigments out of the leaf and put it onto paper. That's all this slide is telling you. Okay, so it is also a very, very short subtopic. So just a very quick summary. What we learned in this subtopic is there are 3 types of photosynthetic pigments. The first type is chlorophyll A, second type chlorophyll B, third type carotenoids. I hope you're able to remember the names of carotenoids and also remember what wavelengths of light do chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and the carotenoids absorb? So, color apa yang dia serap? Color apa yang dia pancarkan balik? Okay, what color does it reflect? Alright, so very simple. What you should do now is just come up with your own notes for this subtopic and then move on to 6.3, and I will see you in the next video. That's all from me for this one. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I will see you again soon. Bye!